Hi guys, it's Grace with Grace Gets Gastric, and I'm here today for my Q3 2020 book roundup. So, talking about some of the books I loved, liked, and didn't particularly care for that I read over the past 3 months. So, if that's the kind of thing you are interested in, go ahead and keep on watching. First off, I'm gonna do my now permanent disclaimer that I'm sorry if my cat is meowing. She just really needs a lot of attention. And she communicates that by meowing. So sorry if you hear that. But yeah, so books. Over the past 3 months, so that would be this, I'm posting this a little bit late, but July, August, and September, I read 88 books. So my total for the year so far is 239. Y'all know I read a lot if you've been watching these videos. A good chunk of those were sort of just romance novels, which I can read really quickly. And I those are kind of my mindless reads when I want to turn my brain off for a while. But 28 of those 88 books were non-romance novels. And then 3 of them were Pulitzer Prize winners. So that brings my total for the year up to 11. I'm hoping to get 15 read this year. That might be pushing it just with my upcoming surgery. Because I'm pretty sure I'm just going to want to read mindless stuff if I want to read it all, but we'll see. Anyways, I'll go ahead and scoot over, and actually I'm going to scoot over here. I had my phone screen fixed, and I don't know if you can see right here, there are these like little weird dot things that when they fixed my phone screen, they did some, I think there's dust or something inside that little camera that I can't get out. And, basically I have to sign a waiver that says, I take any, basically I can't fix it. So it's super annoying because I film all my videos on my phone and now there's these weird dots, but c'est la vie. Anyways, start off with the great category. I actually do have quite a lot of books this time around. But the first one is One Person, No Vote by Carol Anderson. I have talked about her before on my channel. I read White Rage, which I highly recommend. This one I found to be far less consumable. It was a lot denser. I thought it was very, Jesus, what is it? The cat's just done something. I thought it was very well done and like a little bit depressing and terrifying, just realizing how the governments have really rigged the system. You elect officials and then they just manipulate things, and it's just super depressing. But I do think it was like a super important and vital read just to be aware of kind of voter suppression that's happening, and to counter the rhetoric primarily, basically exclusively promoted by the right on voter fraud, which doesn't really exist in any kind of wide-scale fashion. And it is something that a narrative they've purposely created to help them enact these suppression laws. So, like I said, it's a lot denser. It was a little bit harder to get through, but I thought it was really important. The next book, very different, is Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. So this was book is 16 in the Dresden Files series, which I love. I started reading the series like 2 years ago, I think. And I think 2 years ago, I read like the first 15 books, and then he's been taking a lot longer with Peace Talks than he has with anything else. But he finally came out with it, and he actually just released the 17th book. So he basically released 2 books this year because Peace Talks does end on quite a cliffhanger. So I've already got that one. I'm listening to it now. It's great. I really like listening to these on audiobooks just because I love the narrator, James Marsters. Spike from Buffy. He does an excellent job, and I just really love it. It's like a urban fantasy. So it takes place in Chicago, and it's just one of those plots that is so fascinatingly intricate. There are things that happen. It takes a while to build steam. I will say I didn't enjoy the first books as much as the later ones because it just really builds on itself. But there's stuff that happens in the first few books that ends up coming up, now in book 17, 8. It's just a really cool world. Next we have A Very Punchable Face by Colin Jost. I know he is quite polarizing. This was a memoir type thing. He is one of the hosts on Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. And I am neutral on him. I know a lot of people really hate him. I have no strong feelings on him. I did find this to be an amusing book. I like to listen to kind of memoirs by comedians, especially on audiobook, because they usually read it, just because they tend to be amusing. This one was, so I liked it. Then we have Stamps from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi, another fabulous author that I have mentioned on here before with How to Be an Anti-Racist. Must read for everyone. And frankly, I think that this one is also a must read. It was just incredible. I also know that he has a version of this that is more streamlined for younger audiences. I don't know if it's like young adult level or even lower, but if it's quite long, so if you want like a more condensed version, there's also that kind of like kids teen version that is slightly more accessible, but it is sort of a history of racism, racist thought, and anti-racist thought in the United States, and it is super interesting. It was just really incredibly done. Lots of stuff that I am aware of, but also things that I wasn't, and just sort of additional like historical context that was really interesting. The next one is a bit of a silly one, but it was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. So I'm sure to no one's surprise, I was definitely a big Twilight fan in my day. Went to the midnight showings of all the movies, went to the midnight release of Breaking Dawn for the book, all that kind of jazz. No, they're not like highbrow literature, and there's obviously, there's always going to be problematic issues, but I enjoyed them for what they are. And I was definitely someone who read the leaked manuscript of Midnight Sun when she posted it on her blog, and was super bummed that it was never going to become a book, but it was finally a book. It was released, and I actually really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure if I would. It's essentially Twilight told from Edward's point of view, and it definitely gives you new information and new context, and I thought it was really interesting. It's pretty long. It drags a bit, but if you're a fan of the books, it was mostly, I think a lot of my enjoyment was just nostalgic feels. Like it just took me back to a simpler time when there wasn't pandemics and terrifying elections happening, and I was just in high school reading about vampires. Next we have another nonfiction, which is The Radium Girls by Kate Moore, which is a super interesting book about something I never knew about, which was in the United States when like radium, kind of during like the World Wars, when they didn't realize that radium was a super toxic substance, and so they had girls essentially like using it to paint things, and going through horrible diseases and illnesses that were kind of dismissed, and no one understood what was happening. So I thought it was a really interesting read, just about something that I'd never heard of, and it sort of really focuses in on the women as opposed to like the greater historical context, because there's quite a lot of historical context in terms of like worker safety conditions. Then we have The Omnivores Dilemma by Michael Pollan, which I very much enjoyed. I thought it was just a really interesting read about, he kind of talks about various methods, I guess, of eating. So you have, he takes you through how the creation of a meal might happen through the standard industrial way, if you, just regularly buying stuff at the grocery store kind of stuff. Then he takes you through, like a really kind of organic farm type situation, and then like hunting and gathering himself, and just like kind of the processes for all of these different types of meals. I do think that there is some, what feels like a little bit of misinformation, some possibly triggering language just around a lot of clean eating rhetoric, but I just thought it was in general a very fascinating kind of look at our food system. Then we have Packing for Mars by Mary Roach, another author I've talked about many times on my channel. I love her books. She has a lot of nonfiction books. I think this is actually the last one of hers that I had to read until she publishes a new one. But this was probably my favorite, definitely top 3. But it's all about space and traveling to space, and I just thought it was super fascinating. Just one of her better ones for sure. So that one, I thought, if you're gonna read any of them, I definitely would read that one. And then another nonfiction. I read a lot of great nonfiction in the past 3 months. Was The Five by Haley Rubenhold. and it is all about Jack the Ripper's victims, so his 5 victims. And I thought it was just really interesting because it is told entirely, it entirely centers the women who he killed. It doesn't really go into detail about the investigation or about the detail of the murder or any of that gruesome stuff. It really talks about the women themselves, their lives, what we kind of know about them, and particularly gives a lot of information about what it would have been like for them in their, in England at that time, being women, being of a certain social status. And so you just get a kind of a good look at kind of historical England. And so I thought that was really interesting, particularly just seeing the women in the context of like the various structures that maybe led to them being in a position where Jack the Ripper could kill them. And now we have sirens. The joy of living in downtown. And then the final book in the good category, or in the great category rather, is The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. And so this was a Pulitzer Prize winner that covers the Civil War. And I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did, but I thought it was really interesting. You get points of view from both sides of the war, and it's specifically the, oh my God, I'm totally blanking. Was it the Battle of Gettysburg? I don't even know if it was that. I don't think it was that battle. I don't know. It's one specific turning point battle that now I'm totally blanking on, but it was really interesting. Like, he did a lot of research, looking through journals and first person references of the battle, and kind of gets in the head of various generals and soldiers in that battle. And so I thought it was really well done. It was actually surprisingly interesting. I'm not generally super into war type books. I just don't find them that engaging. But I thought this one was really well done. And now we move on to the good category. So these are books that I enjoyed generally, but that didn't totally wow me. But that might be worth a read. The first we have is Queenie by Candace Carty Williams, which is, the cover is beautiful. And it's one that you might have seen a lot. It had quite a bit of buzz that I don't know if it was, I wouldn't say it's undeserved. I would say that it's misleading. A lot of people saying it's kind of like the Black British Jones, which is, no, it's nothing at all. If you're going into this expecting British Jones, you will be very sadly disappointed. The tone of it was entirely different. It was quite a bit grimmer than like a lighthearted rom-com that you might expect from hearing that. So it wasn't quite to my personal taste. I thought the writing was great. I thought that there was some really great characterizations and sort of dialogue moments, but the story itself just didn't quite come together for me. Then we have AntiDiet by Christy Harrison, which is a book I talked about earlier on my channel when I talked about diet culture and fat phobia in the weight loss surgery community. So I'll link that above and below. As I mentioned in this video, I thought that this was a really good book. I think everyone in diet culture, but particularly in the weight loss surgery community, should read it, if only to think about it. Like I said, this is in the good category, not the great. There were a number of things that I didn't think were just fully fleshed out. There's some things that I disagree with, some things that I thought were kind of glossed over. So I don't by any means think it's a perfect book, nor do I agree with everything in it, but I do agree with a lot of it. I do think it is a very interesting and thought-provoking book. And I really appreciate the book for giving me some additional context and resources as I've been working through my own feelings towards food lately, as you know, if you've watched my channel. Then we have the Awakening Land Trilogy by Conrad Richter. And this is sort of a Pulitzer Prize winner. So there's 3 books in the series. The final book won the Pulitzer Prize, but everyone and their mother was saying that you really want to read all 3 of them. It is sort of it's almost like one book split into 3 parts. And having read them all, I definitely agree. I would say actually I liked them less and less as it went on. So my least favorite was actually the Pulitzer Prize winner. But it was a really interesting structure of books that kind of take you through, in particular, a young woman's life, and then just kind of the people around her and the changes she sees over her lifetime in a time, I believe it's in Ohio. So, they get there when it is all woods, and it's called The Woods, the Fields, the Town, and it takes you through the development of this area. So it was a very interesting structure. There were parts of the story that just really didn't gel for me, but I thought it was interesting. Then we have The Near Witch by Victoria Schwab, another author I've talked about before. I really enjoy her work. This was one of her few, if only, standalone novels. And for some reason, this one just didn't quite grab me as much as some of her other works. And to be fair, I started out listening to this one, and I know I was pretty distracted while I was listening to it, and so I think that might have just sort of detracted from it. It's one of those things like, was I distracted because the book wasn't capturing my interest, or was I distracted because I was trying to do something else and then I didn't give the book a chance to capture my interest? I don't know. I did enjoy it. If you enjoy kind of YA fantasy type stuff, it might be worth a read / listen. And then the last book in this category is White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I've heard a lot of good things about this author, and it was one of the 2 books I bought during that, there was like a Black Publishing Week where they encouraged, the internet encouraged you to buy 2 Black authors or books by Black authors, and if possible from a Black-owned bookstore, which I did. And so this is one of the books I bought, and I really wanted to love it, but I didn't. I thought it was brilliantly written. Characters were just very richly portrayed. But it is a longer book in which not much happens. It is one of those types of books where you're really just like following, you basically follow 2 families along several generations. And I just didn't end up caring enough about any of the characters to care enough about the story. When something is so character driven and focused, you need to really love the characters. And while I thought that they were brilliantly captured, I just didn't really connect with any of them. So a bit mad, but I'm planning and intending to read more by this author to see if maybe some of her other stuff hits harder for me. And then finally, we have the meh category. These are books that I didn't particularly like, to kind of flopped for me, and not too many this month, actually. The first is Steppenwolf by Herman Hesse. Yeah, I thought I would love this book just because the themes are totally up my alley, but it just didn't quite work for me. And this, again, could be because I was quite distracted while listening to this on audiobook, and perhaps that influenced my feels. But I also I just don't think I was in the right headspace for it, and something about it just didn't quite land. So I thought this one was just a bit meh. The next is Housemate of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday, and this is a Pulitzer Prize winner that, again, I really wanted to love, particularly for its, historical cultural influence, as this was as a Native American author, and his winning the Pulitzer Prize winner was, quite a big moment for Native American literature, and kind of maybe pushing more of that into the mainstream. I think it was a very important piece, but I didn't like it at all. Stylistically, it was quite unusual, and something about it kind of reminded me of like Japanese fiction style, which I also just does not work for me. And that might just be my own Western bias showing. That is what I was raised on. That's the kind of fiction and literature I read. And so that is what is most familiar to me. And I do try to push my boundaries and read outside of that, but I just felt confused from the entire book. And I don't enjoy feeling confused when I read it. That confusion turns to anger, and then I just don't like reading. So I was just kind of left with the sensation of, what? So yeah, that one was a bit of a flop for me. And then finally, we have One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I'm sure I butchered that. It's Russian. This was another book that I found interesting in concept. I didn't quite care enough about the characters. This is written from one day in the life of Ivan, obviously. So it takes place over one day of his life in essentially like the Russian concentration camps. So I thought, it's something that I don't really know a ton about, so I found it very interesting in that sense, but I just wasn't totally grabbed by it, and that might have just been the style. I mean, it was obviously a translation, so there's always a little bit of that, but I actually quite like Russian literature, so I thought I'd like this one more. For some reason, it just didn't quite connect. Sometimes it happens. So anyways, that's everything. Sorry if that was quite long. I think I talked pretty fast, so If it's too fast, you can always slow down the speed, which is something I actually always listen to everything on YouTube on double speed because I'm crazy. But if it is too fast for you, you can also slow down the speed. So, fun tip. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought. If you guys have any book recommendations for me, I am always keen to add more things to my TBR list. So I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll talk to you all in my next video.